I was 9 years old the first time I realized my parents didn't see me the same way they saw my brother. His name is Derek, 2 years older than me, better looking, louder, more athletic, and as my mom used to joke, born lucky. I'm Jim. I'm 33 now, and if you ask anyone who knew us growing up, they'd probably describe me as the quiet one, or the other one. Derek got the spotlight, the applause, the proud smiles. I got polite nods and an occasional, "That's nice, honey," before the conversation turned back to whatever amazing thing Derek had done that day. It wasn't always cruel. At least not at first. It was more like indifference. The kind that wraps around you slowly, like a draft you don't notice until you're shivering. We grew up in a middle-class suburb in Illinois. My dad was an accountant, stern, quiet, rarely home before 7. My mom stayed at home, and everything revolved around Derek. If he had a baseball game, dinner waited. If he forgot his science project, she'd rush to the school with it, still in her slippers. When I got a perfect score on a math test, she glanced at it and said, good job, then went back to watching Derek's highlight reel. I used to tell myself it wasn't favoritism. That maybe Derek just needed more attention. Maybe I didn't ask for enough. Maybe if I tried harder, scored higher, won more trophies, smiled more, they'd see me too. I tried. I really did. I joined the chess club, then mathletes, then the debate team. I placed nationally twice in high school, once in debate, once in a programming competition. My mom's reaction? That's nice, but Derek got a B+ in chemistry. Can you believe it? That class is brutal. My dad didn't say anything at all. Derek, for his part, wasn't a monster. At least not then. He was charming, confident, and effortlessly likable. He knew how to work a room. Teachers adored him. Coaches practically worshipped him. He got drunk at a party junior year and wrecked his friend's car into a fence. My parents blamed the fence. Those people shouldn't have put it so close to the road, my mom muttered, arms folded, defending him to the police like a lawyer on payroll. He didn't even get grounded. I, on the other hand, once came home 5 minutes late from tutoring and got a lecture about respecting the family's time. When I tried to push back, Mom snapped, "Don't you dare act like Derek. You're better than that." I remember staring at her, stunned, thinking, better? You don't even see me. That was the first time I felt it. Not just the unfairness, but the cold weight of being invisible. By the time we were in college, the difference in treatment was so blatant, it was almost comedic. Derek got a full ride, not academic, not athletic, just fully paid by my parents. He wanted to find himself, so he changed majors 3 times, dropped classes mid-semester, and spent 2 years abroad studying business, which mostly meant traveling through Europe on my parents' dime. He sent them selfies from beaches and bars. They hung each one on the fridge like he was solving world hunger. Me? I got partial scholarships, worked 2 part-time jobs, and still graduated a year early. I taught myself coding between shifts at the campus coffee shop, pulling all-nighters in the library while Derek was in Prague networking. When I asked for help with rent one semester, just one semester, my dad sighed and said, "We can't keep bailing you out, Jim. You're an adult now." Bailing me out. I didn't drink, didn't party, never got in trouble. I just wanted to keep the heat on in December. I moved out the day after graduation and never looked back. Didn't even wait for the ceremony. My parents didn't notice until I mailed them my diploma. Over the next decade, I threw myself into work. No backup, no safety net. Just me, my laptop, and a whole lot of resentment I tried to bury under 16-hour days. I started a company at 24, nothing flashy at first. Just a small app to help freelancers manage invoices and time tracking. It caught on. Slowly, quietly, then fast. I didn't tell my family. Not when we hit 100K users. Not when we got funding. Not even when we were featured in a Forbes Startups to Watch list. I didn't need their approval anymore, I told myself. But deep down, I think I just didn't want to give them a reason to come back into my life. Not until I knew who I was without them. Fast forward to this past Christmas. I hadn't been home in years. Not since Derek's wedding, which was a whole other story. But this time, my mom called me 3 weeks out and said, "It's been too long. We're doing a family dinner. Everyone's coming. Even your cousin Jackie is flying in from Oregon." I hesitated. Then she added, "Derek's bringing his new girlfriend. She's very classy." Of course he was. I don't know why I said yes. Maybe I wanted to see if things had changed. Maybe I wanted to believe they could. Maybe I was just tired of carrying that invisible weight around and thought one dinner wouldn't kill me. I rented a car, drove 4 hours in the snow, wore a new blazer. I even brought a bottle of nice wine. Real nice, not gas station holiday red. I practiced small talk in my head. Smile. Nod. Don't start anything. The house hadn't changed much. Same green shutters, same worn welcome mat. My mom greeted me at the door with a tight hug and a distant, "Oh, you're thinner than your photos." Derek came bounding down the stairs like a Labrador, arms wide. "Jimmy, look at you, man." I smiled, shook his hand. "Hey, Derek." His girlfriend, Melanie, was tall, graceful, and clearly used to being photographed. She gave me a once-over and said, "You're the tech guy, right?" "I guess," I said. Dinner was roast beef, mashed potatoes, and a dozen side dishes I barely remembered liking. We were all crammed into the dining room, 12 people elbow to elbow, laughter bouncing off the walls. Derek dominated the conversation, as usual, telling a long-winded story about how he almost met Mark Cuban at some charity golf event. My mom clapped like he'd won a Pulitzer. My dad chuckled politely between sips of scotch. I mostly stayed quiet, ate slowly, nodded when spoken to, until Jackie, bless her, turned to me mid-meal and said, "So what have you been up to, Jim? I heard your app did pretty well." The room paused. I hadn't planned on saying anything. I was going to let the night pass like all the others, unnoticed. But something in me shifted. Maybe it was the way my mom was already turning back to Derek, assuming the conversation would veer away again. Maybe I just snapped. I set down my fork, took a sip of wine, and said casually, "I sold the company last month. 30 million. The silence was immediate and perfect. Then Derek coughed, like violently. Wine sprayed from his nose. Melanie gasped and handed him a napkin. My mom stared at me like I'd confessed to arson. "Wait," she said slowly, voice high and tight. "You sold it? You mean your little app thing?" "It wasn't that little, Mom." "But 30 million? I shrugged. "Yeah, after taxes and fees, it'll be less. But still enough." Derek dropped his napkin. "Are you joking?" "No," I said, meeting his eyes. "Why would I joke about that?" His face turned red. Then he laughed, sharp and forced. "Okay, so where's my cut?" I blinked. "Your what?" "My cut," he said louder now. "You made millions because I inspired you. You always wanted to beat me, right? That was your whole thing growing up. So I deserve something for that." My mom's hand shot up. "Derek's right." I turned to her, genuinely stunned. "Excuse me. You owe him," she said, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "He was your role model. You wouldn't have done any of this without trying to catch up to him." That's when something inside me cracked. But I didn't yell, didn't storm off. I just sat there, frozen, as a tidal wave of old memories crashed through me. Missed birthdays, ignored report cards, the cold silence after every accomplishment they pretended not to see. And now, after all these years, after building something entirely on my own, they still thought I owed him? Derek leaned forward, both elbows on the table, grinning like he'd just won the lottery. "So what do you think is fair?" "Half. I mean, you wouldn't have gotten anywhere without me." I didn't answer. Not yet. Because in that moment, I knew something they didn't. And I had a plan. A very, very specific plan. But I wasn't going to rush it. Not yet. Not before letting this entire room show me just how far they were willing to go. And oh, they did. I didn't sleep much that night. After dinner, I sat in the old guest room. Same faded wallpaper, same creaky twin bed, even the same scratchy quilt from when I was a kid, and stared at the ceiling for hours. My ears were still ringing with Derek's smug voice asking for his cut, and my mother's voice, so sharp, so sure, declaring, "You owe him everything." The audacity of it wasn't what stung most. It was the ease with which she'd said it. Like it was simply a matter of math. Like my life's work, my sleepless nights, my sacrificed weekends, my anxiety attacks in small apartments, my ramen dinners for months on end, were all some kind of unspoken debt to my golden child of a brother. And the worst part? No one stood up for me. Not Dad. Not Cousin Jackie. Not Uncle Pete. Not even Melanie, who just sipped her wine like this was an awkward joke that needed to blow over. I watched them all. Watched how quickly they fell back into orbit around Derek, just like they always had. And in that moment, I realized something I should have accepted years ago. They didn't just prefer Derek. They needed him to be the success story. They had built their whole identities around it. If I had succeeded quietly, that was fine. Cute even. But now that my success was undeniable, it didn't fit the narrative. And people don't like broken narratives. The next morning, I came down to the kitchen early, thinking maybe I'd sneak out before anyone else woke up. I'd leave a polite note, thank them for the dinner, maybe send a gift basket later. But of course, I wasn't that lucky. Mom was already up, hands deep in biscuit dough, her back stiff like she'd been awake since dawn. Morning, I said cautiously. She didn't look up. There's coffee. I poured myself a cup, stood awkwardly, then finally said, about last night. You embarrassed your brother, she snapped, still not looking at me. You ambushed him. I blinked. By answering a question? Don't play dumb, Jim. You knew what you were doing. Sitting there all smug, waiting to drop your little bombshell. It wasn't a bombshell. Jackie asked what I'd been up to. You could have downplayed it. Or told me privately. You know Derek's been under a lot of stress lately. I stared at her. Mom, do you even hear yourself? He demanded half of what I earned. And you backed him. He deserves something, she said, pressing the dough harder now. He's always looked out for you. I laughed, bitterly. When he borrowed my car in college and got it towed. When he skipped my graduation because of a concert. When he told everyone at Thanksgiving that my app was a glorified calculator. She flinched, just a little. But not enough. You're twisting things, she said. You always see yourself as the victim. I set the mug down harder than I meant to. You never saw me. Not once. And now that I've built something, you think Derek deserves a piece because he inspired me? That's not how life works. She finally turned to look at me. Her eyes were tired. Hard. In this family, we help each other. Derek's going through a rough time. I frowned. What rough time? She hesitated. That's when the door behind me creaked. Derek walked in, shirtless, yawning, clearly hungover. He grabbed the orange juice straight from the fridge and drank it from the carton. Morning, peasants, he said, grinning. Mom laughed like it was charming. I wanted to throw the mug through the window. I heard you too, Derek said, wiping his mouth. You still mad about last night, Jimmy? Come on, it was just a joke. You weren't joking, I said coldly. He smirked. Maybe not entirely. I mean, it'd be nice if you helped out a bit. Things are kinda tight right now. Mom shot him a look. What do you mean, tight? I asked. He stretched, then dropped into a chair. Just, some bad investments. Melanie's got expensive tastes. And my car's on its last leg. I narrowed my eyes. You drive a Lexus. Had to sell it, he said casually. I'm using Melanie's for now. But she wants me to buy her a new one before New Year's. Said it'd be a statement. I stared. Wait, you want me to help you buy your girlfriend a car? He shrugged. It's not about the car, man. It's about family. We've always looked out for each other. I looked at Mom. She was drying her hands, looking anywhere but at me. You told him I'd help, I said slowly. Silence. You told him, I repeated. Before I even got here. I might have mentioned that you'd done well, she said. And Derek assumed. No, you assumed, I snapped. You assumed I'd roll in here and open my wallet like a good little brother. Derek scoffed. Wow, you really think you're better than us now, huh? I clenched my jaw. I think I earned what I have, and I don't owe you a cent. He stood suddenly, the chair scraping against the floor. You wouldn't even be who you are if it weren't for me. You were always trying to catch up, competing. Don't pretend like your whole life wasn't about proving me wrong. I stopped trying to compete with you 10 years ago, I said. You just never noticed. He moved closer, puffing up his chest like we were kids again. You really gonna turn your back on your family? I looked at him, at Mom, at the kitchen that smelled like cinnamon and rage. And I said, depends. Are you still my family? He didn't answer. Neither did she. That night, the real betrayal came. I went to bed early, locked the door behind me. I was done. I had every intention of leaving before dawn and never coming back. But around midnight, I woke up thirsty. I grabbed my phone, slipped out of the room, and went downstairs for some water. As I passed the living room, I heard whispering. I stopped, peered in. Derek was sitting on the couch with Dad. They were talking in hushed tones, but I caught a few words. Doesn't need all of it. Just a small transfer. He'll get over it. I stepped in. Get over what? They both froze. My father, who hadn't said more than a sentence to me since I arrived, stood up slowly. Jim, we were just plotting how to take money from me behind my back. I asked. Derek waved a hand. Don't be dramatic. It was just an idea. I turned to my dad. What kind of idea? He hesitated. We thought, maybe if we had access to a portion of your funds, We could help Derek get back on his feet. Maybe start something of his own. I stared at him, stunned. Access to my funds. Temporarily, he added quickly. You're young. You don't need all of it right away. I actually laughed. It came out hollow. So that's what this is about. I worked for 10 years, made something of myself, and now you're trying to redistribute it like I'm some kind of trust fund baby. You wouldn't be where you are without this family, he said. No, I said, my voice low. I'm where I am in spite of this family. Derek stood again, bristling. Careful, Jimmy. You're making enemies. Am I? I asked. Because from where I'm standing, you were never really on my side. He stormed past me, muttering something under his breath. My father just shook his head like I'd disappointed him somehow. I went back upstairs, packed my bag. But as I zipped it closed, I noticed something that stopped me cold. My laptop was open. I never leave it open. And the browser history? Someone had tried to access my financial accounts. I stared at the screen, then at the door, then back at the screen. And that's when the rage truly set in. Not the hot kind that burns fast and wild, but the cold, meticulous kind that settles deep in your bones. They didn't just want my money. They were already trying to take it. And that was the last mistake they were ever going to make. I left before sunrise. Didn't say goodbye. Didn't leave a note. I slid out the front door with my backpack over one shoulder, my laptop clutched tightly in my hand, and every muscle in my body stiff with betrayal. I didn't even look back at the house. I was afraid if I did, I might hesitate, might forgive. And this time, there would be no forgiveness. The drive home felt like a bad dream. The world still cloaked in early morning fog, the highways nearly empty, my phone buzzing every few minutes with calls from unknown numbers, probably Mom's landline, or Derek using someone else's phone. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I wasn't ready to hear what they'd say, or worse, how they'd try to spin it. By the time I got back to my apartment, the adrenaline had worn off and the exhaustion set in. I dropped my bags, collapsed onto the couch, and just sat there, staring at the ceiling fan as it spun in slow, lazy circles above me. They tried to access my financials. They tried to steal from me. That thought looped in my head like a skipping record. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't a conversation gone wrong. It was a betrayal, deliberate and calculated. I kept replaying the image of my dad, stoic, measured, once the authority in my world, conspiring with Derek like it was normal. Like I was just a piggy bank they were entitled to shake loose. The worst part? I wasn't even surprised. I should have seen it coming. All those years of being second place, the overlooked son, the backup plan. In their eyes, I'd always been the side character. My success. A fluke. A happy accident that could be redirected to help the family. Meaning Derek. Always Derek. But knowing that didn't make it easier. For the first week, I didn't do much. I canceled meetings. Ignored texts. Turned down interviews. My assistant, Emily, kept asking if I was okay, and I kept replying with vague, just under the weather messages. I wasn't ready to explain. Not yet. I sat with the silence. Let myself feel it all. Anger, sadness, confusion, even guilt. Not guilt for refusing to share my earnings, but for still caring. For still hoping, deep down, that my family might someday choose me. It was pathetic, really. On the 8th day, I finally opened my laptop. Not to check my bank account or read the latest articles about the acquisition, but to look at the security logs. I wanted to know exactly what they tried to do. It was worse than I thought. Derek had guessed the password to my old email, the one linked to some outdated accounts I rarely touched anymore. It was a variation of our childhood dog's name, something I'd never think twice about. But he had. And from there, he tried to reset access to several backup logins. Luckily, multi-factor authentication saved me. But the intent was clear. He didn't just want money. He wanted access. That flipped a switch in me. Suddenly, I didn't feel numb anymore. I felt focused. I spent the next 2 weeks doing a complete overhaul. New passwords, 2-factor keys, lockdowns on every account. I hired a cybersecurity consultant. Paranoid, maybe, but I wanted every angle covered. I even created decoy accounts, just in case. If they ever tried something like this again, I'd be ready. But that was just the start. Because underneath the security updates and firewalls, a new idea had begun to form. A quiet, calculated one. Not revenge. Not exactly. But something close. A way to finally reclaim my story. To remind myself, and them, who I really was. It started with a phone call. To Emily. Hey. I said, my voice still a little rough. I'm ready to get back to work. She didn't ask questions, just said, good, because the world's been waiting. We started slow. A few meetings, a podcast appearance, a short interview for a tech magazine. I didn't talk about the acquisition much. I let the numbers speak for themselves. But I could feel the energy returning. That fire, that drive. And for the first time in weeks, I remembered why I started all this in the first place. Not to prove anyone wrong, but to prove myself right. In February, I launched a mentorship program, quietly, under a different name. Just a small group of developers, designers, and young founders trying to get their first projects off the ground. I didn't advertise it, didn't put my face on it. I just showed up, week after week, helping them debug code, pitch investors, refine their vision. And something strange happened. I felt happy, not the performative kind, not the Instagram smile, look at my life kind, but real, internal joy. Watching these kids light up when something clicked, when an idea worked, when their first user signed up, I saw myself in them. The younger me, the one who stayed up all night, dreaming of something bigger. In March, I got an email from a journalist at a major publication. She wanted to do a feature, not just on my app, but on my story, my personal story. She'd heard whispers about my background, my family, the way I bootstrapped everything without connections. At first, I hesitated, but then I said yes. The piece ran in early April. It was titled, The Forgotten Brother Who Built a Tech Empire. Dramatic? Sure, but accurate. It told the story of a kid who was overlooked, underestimated, and left behind, who built something in the shadows, who rose anyway. The response was overwhelming. My inbox flooded with messages from fellow founders, from kids in similar families, even from former teachers who admitted they hadn't realized what I was capable of. And then came the part one didn't expect, the apology letters, from strangers, from people who said they had been the directs in someone else's life, the golden children, the ones who didn't realize the damage they'd done. Some were heartfelt, some were performative, but all of them made one thing clear. I wasn't alone. And for the first time, I realized that my story wasn't just mine. It was bigger than that. It was ours. By May, the mentorship program had grown to over 300 people. I was invited to speak at 2 conferences. One of my mints got accepted into a top accelerator. Another landed a seed round from a VC I had introduced him to. I didn't tell my family any of this. Didn't send the article. Didn't call on Mother's Day. But of course, they found out anyway. It was Derek who texted first. Derek, nice article. So you're playing the victim now? I didn't reply. 2 days later, I got an email from my mom. Long winding. Equal parts guilt-tripping and faux concern. We never meant to hurt you, Jim. You're taking everything so personally. Families fight, but we're still your family. Don't you think it's time to move on? Derek's really struggling, and you've made it worse with all this press. People are talking. Yes, people were talking. And for once, they weren't praising Derek. They were asking about me. I didn't respond to the email either. Not because I didn't have words, but because I finally understood something important. Closure doesn't always come from conversation. Sometimes it comes from distance. I kept building. Quietly. Steadily. I took on new projects, invested in small startups, helped local businesses modernize their tech. I volunteered at a community college once a week, teaching basic coding to students who reminded me of my younger self. Hungry, tired, overlooked. I rebuilt my life brick by brick, not out of spite, but out of clarity. And just when I thought the past might finally stay buried, the wedding invitation arrived. White envelope, gold embossed font. Derek and Melanie. They were getting married in September. And guess who was listed as best man? Not me, of course. But apparently, I was still cordially invited. With a handwritten note on the back. You've made your point. Now come home and be part of the family again. We miss you. Bring a gift. I stared at that card for a long time. Then I turned it over and started planning. Because I wasn't done yet. They thought I'd gone quiet. They thought I'd forgiven. But I had one more chapter to write. And this time, it would be my story. I stood in my kitchen, invitation in hand, staring at the gold lettering like it was some kind of threat. You've made your point. Now come home and be part of the family again. We miss you. Bring a gift. It was Derek's handwriting. I recognized the way he curled his R's, like he was trying too hard to look elegant. That last sentence was what really did it. Bring a gift. Like nothing had happened. Like they hadn't tried to steal from me, manipulate me, gaslight me, and then freeze me out when I didn't cave. And now, I was being summoned. That wasn't an invitation. That was a power play. A reminder that no matter how far I'd come, they still thought they had control. That Derek's wedding was the stage, and I was just another extra in the production. I slid the card onto the counter and let it sit there for 2 full days. I didn't throw it away. I didn't RSVP. I just watched it, like it was alive. And slowly, an idea began to form. Not revenge in the Hollywood sense. No dramatic confrontation or public humiliation. That would be too easy, too quick. What I wanted was something quieter, something colder. I didn't want to just get back at them. I wanted to rewire the whole dynamic. To take the script they'd written for me, quiet, second best, supporting role, and shred it, line by line. If they wanted me to attend, I would. But not as Jim, the forgotten little brother. I'd show up as the man I'd become, the man they tried to erase. And I'd make sure they saw every inch of him. The first step was information. I reached out to a friend of mine, Zoe. We'd met years ago at a tech conference in Austin, and while I went on to launch my startup, she'd gone a different route. PR, digital branding, crisis management. She was the kind of person who could find out what brand of toothpaste a CEO used if you gave her 30 minutes and a laptop. I called her up. "You planning to burn something down?" she asked after I explained. "Not literally," I said. "Just want to know what I'm walking into." "You could just ignore them." "I could," I admitted. "But I've done that. And it didn't work. I want this to end differently." Zoe didn't press. She never did. "All right," she said. "Give me everything you've got." I told her about the wedding, the email, the attempted password breach, the way my mother had backed Derek like it was second nature. Zoe paused, then said, "I'll dig." It took her 3 days. What she found didn't surprise me, but it did crystallize things. Derek was broke. Not things are tight broke. I mean actual broke. Credit card debt in the 5-figure range. 2 failed LLCs registered in his name. Melanie's old car? Repossessed. His LinkedIn still listed him as freelance business consultant, but Zoe found no trace of actual clients. And the wedding? Fully funded by Melanie's parents, who, according to a few whispers on Facebook, were less than thrilled about it. Especially after Derek's last investment opportunity drained a chunk of their savings. I sat at my desk, reading through Zoe's report, and everything clicked. This wasn't just about family. This wedding was Derek's last performance. And they needed me there. Not because they missed me, or loved me, or wanted to reconnect. They needed me there because the optics mattered. Because my absence would raise questions. And worse, they probably hoped I'd bring a flashy gift. Something they could show off. "Look who came crawling back. Look how generous our golden son's brother is." I closed the report and leaned back in my chair. They wanted a prop. I'd give them something else entirely. Step 2 was presentation. I reached out to a stylist. Yeah, I know how that sounds, but bear with me. I hadn't updated my wardrobe since the acquisition. I had a couple nice blazers, some tailored button-downs, but nothing that screamed, "This guy sold a company for $30 million and doesn't need to prove it to you." That was the look I wanted. Polished, but subtle. Confident, not flashy. We put together a capsule outfit. Designer suit. Fitted perfectly, soft charcoal gray with a subtle pattern you'd only notice if you were paying attention. Shirt open-collared, no tie. A watch that didn't scream for attention but cost more than Derek's last 2 cars combined. Comfortable shoes, sleek haircut. Simple cologne. Everything curated to say, "I didn't come to impress you. This is just my Tuesday." Next came the date. I wasn't going alone. I debated hiring someone, too obvious. Instead, I reached out to Sabrina, an old friend from college. We'd lost touch for a few years, then reconnected during the mentorship program. She was smart, beautiful, and had a killer sense of humor that could slice through any pretentious gathering. Best of all, she knew exactly what this was. When I told her the plan, she laughed. "So I'm your +1 to your brother's ego circus?" "Basically." "I'm in," she said. "But only if I get to wear something dramatic and mysterious." "Deal." I booked her a flight and put her in touch with the stylist. She picked a deep burgundy dress with an asymmetrical cut that made it look like she'd just stepped off a red carpet. Her hair was done up in loose waves, her lipstick sharp enough to cut glass. We looked good together, like we'd walked out of a magazine. And that was exactly the point. The wedding was scheduled for the first Saturday in September at some pretentious country club 2 hours outside Chicago. The kind of place with fountains for no reason and chandeliers in the bathroom. I booked a sleek black car for the drive. Sabrina and I arrived right on time, fashionably so. As we pulled up, I could already see the crowd clustering outside the venue. Pastels and beige suits and nervous laughter. Melanie's friends, I assumed. The real show was inside. Ready? I asked. Sabrina smirked. Let's ruin some egos. We walked in, side by side, and within seconds, I felt the air shift. People turned. Eyes flicked toward us. Whispers began. I kept my expression neutral. Not smug. Just calm. Like I'd been here 1,000 times before. We checked in at the welcome table. My name was on the list. Barely. Scribbled in, almost as an afterthought. I didn't miss that detail. Inside, the venue was decked out like a Pinterest board exploded. Gold trimmed everything, faux vintage lighting, tablecloths that looked starched to death. A string quartet played near the bar, but no one was really listening. I spotted Mom first. She was near the back, talking to a cluster of distant relatives. Her eyes met mine, and for a moment, she froze. Then the smile snapped into place. "Oh, Jim," she said, walking over. "You made it." She barely looked at Sabrina. "I did," I said, keeping my tone even. She leaned in for a hug, then hesitated. "You look different." I shrugged. "I've been busy." She glanced at my suit, the watch, the car keys I'd tucked into my coat. Then back at Sabrina. "And who is this?" "Sabrina," she said coolly, offering her hand. "Jim's date." My mother's smile twitched. "Well," she said, "the ceremony's starting soon. Derek will be so pleased you came." I didn't respond, because I knew Derek had no idea I was coming. And judging by the look on his face when we entered the main hall, I was right. He was standing at the front, talking to some groomsmen when he saw us. His jaw actually dropped. Sabrina squeezed my hand. "Showtime." We didn't approach him right away. I wanted to let the tension build. Let him stew. Instead, we made a slow lap around the room, greeting some of the older relatives, smiling politely. I caught fragments of gossip. "Is that Jim? He looks different. I thought he moved to Seattle. That girl's stunning. Is she his girlfriend?" Every whisper was a victory. Eventually, we made our way toward the groom. "Jimmy," Derek said, arms wide like he was greeting an old friend. "Man, you made it." He pulled me into a quick, one-armed hug. I didn't return it. "Hey, Derek. Congratulations." He looked me over. "Wow. Look at you. All cleaned up. Got a date and everything." Sabrina smiled tightly. "Hi. Heard a lot about you." "I'll bet," Derek said, eyes flicking back to me. "So, I assume you got the registry." I did. He waited. I didn't elaborate. A flicker of irritation crossed his face. "I mean, not that you have to get anything from it," he said. "Just suggestions. We're really hoping for the espresso machine, though. It's top of the line." "Good to know." He laughed awkwardly. "So, how's work?" "Great," I said. "I'm mentoring a few startups now. Staying busy." "Still milking that app sale, huh?" he said with a smirk. Sabrina's eyebrow lifted, but I touched her arm lightly. "Let it go." "For now," I said. "Money's a tool. It's how you use it that counts." He didn't like that. Not one bit. I could see it in the way his smile tightened. He didn't have control. Not anymore. And he knew it. He was scrambling, trying to figure out what angle he had left. He had no idea that the real move was still coming. Because I wasn't just here to make a statement. I had something to deliver. But not yet. Let him sweat. Let him wonder. Let the mask slip. And when it finally did, I'd be ready. The ceremony was exactly what I expected, overproduced, overlong, and overwrought with performative vows written like Instagram captions. Melanie was beautiful, of course. She always was. But her smile didn't reach her eyes, and Derek looked more like a man closing a deal than someone pledging his heart. When the officiant declared them husband and wife, Derek gave a victorious nod to the crowd like he'd just won a game. I clapped politely. Sabrina leaned in and whispered, "This whole event feels like a grand delusion." "It is," I murmured. "But every delusion eventually pops." And mine was coming. During the cocktail hour, we made our way through the crowd. I let Derek see me talking to the wealthiest-looking guests. I let him overhear my conversations with investors, a founder I'd helped fund, a woman who ran a foundation I'd donated to. None of it was loud. None of it was showy. But it was visible. I made sure of that. And Derek noticed. He kept glancing over, trying to laugh louder, smile bigger, shake hands harder. But I saw it. The twitch in his jaw, the fidgeting, the hollow eyes scanning for leverage. He found none. When it was time for the reception dinner, our table was tucked far in the back corner, next to the coat check. Clearly not a mistake. Mom had arranged the seating chart, her final, petty move to remind me where I stood in the family hierarchy. Sabrina just smiled. Best view of the exits. I'll take it, I said. The speeches began shortly after dessert. Melanie's maid of honor gave a shaky, tearful toast about loyalty and dreams and the beauty of believing in someone who hasn't found themselves yet. It sounded more like a eulogy than a wedding speech. Then it was Derek's best man, a college friend who told an endless story about a trip to Cancun, punctuated with forced laughter and inside jokes no one else understood. And then came the surprise. We'd like to invite Derek's brother up to say a few words, the MC said. I blinked. No one told me I'd be speaking. Derek was smirking again. That old, oily smirk. The one that said, let's see if you squirm. I stood slowly. Sabrina gave my hand a squeeze. You got this. I walked up to the mic, feeling every eye in the room turned toward me. Some faces curious, some wary. Mom's expression was unreadable. Dad's was tight. Derek stood near the sweetheart table, arms crossed like he was about to enjoy the show. I tapped the mic. Evening, everyone. A few scattered claps. I wasn't expecting to speak tonight, I said, but it's hard to pass up a chance to talk about family. Especially mine. A few polite chuckles. I'm Jim, Derek's brother. The quiet one, as some of you might remember. The kid who liked books more than baseball, who wasn't exactly prom king material. Growing up, it was clear I was different. And in our family, different didn't mean special. It meant less. The room stilled. I used to think maybe if I worked hard enough, achieved enough, became enough, I'd earn a seat at the table. But what I've learned, what I want to share, is that sometimes the table is broken. Sometimes the people who are supposed to lift you up will weigh you down, and they'll call it love. I glanced at Mom. Her jaw clenched. Derek frowned. But I'm not here to drag old wounds into a new marriage. I came because I wanted closure. And maybe, in a strange way, to say thank you. Because the distance you all created, the silence, the rejection, the betrayal, it taught me something important. I looked right at Derek now. It taught me to survive without you, to succeed without you, to build something no one thought I could. And while you were busy being the golden boy, I was quietly building a life, a business, a legacy. His smile was gone now. Dead silence. I took a deep breath. So congratulations, Derek, on your marriage, on your new life. I sincerely hope it's everything you wanted. And as for the past, consider this my final gift. I stepped down without waiting for applause. There was none, anyway, just stunned silence. Sabrina stood as I returned to our table. We didn't sit. We walked out, calm, composed, like the scene was already behind us. As we passed my mother, she reached out and grabbed my arm. Jim, she hissed, what do you think you just did? I told the truth, I said. You embarrassed the family. No, I said, turning to her. You embarrassed the family. Years ago, every time you looked through me, every time you built Derek up while tearing me down, you just never thought I'd have a voice loud enough to echo. Her face turned pale. You've always been so dramatic. And you've always been so small. Her hand fell away from my arm like I burned her. We walked out into the night air, cool and crisp against my skin. But the revenge wasn't finished. Because I had one more move to make. 3 weeks after the wedding, a letter arrived at Derek and Melanie's new apartment. A wedding gift, hand-delivered. It wasn't from me. It was from my lawyer. Inside the envelope was a formal notification that Derek's most recent business venture, his media startup, had violated trademark boundaries. Turns out, in his desperation, Derek had tried to piggyback off one of the sub-brands I'd quietly registered years ago under a shell corporation. Same name, same logo, even similar marketing language. It was sloppy, obvious, and legally indefensible. The cease and desist was ironclad. But that wasn't the real hit. Attached to it was a separate document, a legal claim for damages, projected loss of brand integrity, and a full audit request of Derek's financials for the past 18 months. Melanie's parents, who had co-signed his latest loan, got a copy too. So did the local business bureau. And just like that, the curtain fell. I didn't need to drag him through the courts. I knew Derek didn't have the funds to fight it. The mere threat of a lawsuit, one that Melanie's parents would be on the hook for, was enough. 3 weeks later, I received a text. Derek, why are you doing this? You already won. I stared at the screen for a long time before replying. Me? No, Derek. I survived. There's a difference. He didn't reply. A month later, I heard from a mutual contact that Melanie had left him. Her parents had pulled all funding, and the apartment they'd rented on credit was gone. Derek moved back in with my parents. Temporarily, of course, just until he got back on his feet. He never did. As for me, I kept going. I grew the mentorship program, launched a nonprofit to support underrepresented youth in tech, and continued investing in startups that reminded me of my own journey. I bought a house on the coast, quiet, clean, with a wraparound porch where I could watch the waves roll in while sipping coffee. I stopped wondering why they didn't love me the way I wanted, because I'd finally learned how to love myself in the way I needed. And that was the real revenge. Living a life they could no longer touch. Living a life they never believed I could have. Final line. I never gave them a seat at my table again, and I never missed their voices at mine.